Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Awesome. It's great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you as well.
My guest today is an indie artist that defies genres. Flay, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. By the way, I heard you're a huge fan of podcasts. So I want to know, first and foremost, which podcasts can you turn me on to? I heard you talk about the Obama Springsteen one, but tell me more.
Oh, okay, well, my all-time favorite podcast is called Heavyweight. Are you familiar with that at
I
all?
am not, but what's it about?
Oh
Enlighten
my
me.
God. Okay. Well, I don't want to take over this whole conversation, but essentially, Jonathan Goldstein is the host, and it's about every episode he helps somebody, like just a person, resolve an unresolved conflict from their past that for whatever reason has weighed heavily on their like conscience or their spirit or whatever. Um so like there's really interesting one. There's actually a music related one where like the dude who gave Moby a bunch of CDs that he then sampled for his big record Play,
And never
he
got
feels
credited
like,
for.
and he never got them back. He
Oh,
never got
okay.
he never got them back. He lent them to him. And so they like straight up go to Moby's house and
Wow.
like
And they
hash it
confront
out.
him.
Mhm.
That's amazing. By the way, does that apply to you? Do you have any unresolved issues that we can tackle? I mean, we want to get into your life story. We want to talk about your new record. You're actually going to perform like two songs, which is great, and I'm super excited about that. But and we this show is really about your life story. Okay, so we'll get into that. But any stories that are unresolved for you that we can get into, like that podcast?
Ooh. I mean, this is interesting. This has come up in the context of this new song I have out called Four Letter Words, where it reminded me of. So when I was, I guess, about 7, I got a mushroom cut, like a haircut,
Sure.
to like match my brother, and I was 7, and so I looked like a little boy,
Yeah.
and people would like we'd go to like Little Caesars or whatever to pick up pizza, and people would be like, "Okay, young man," and I'd be like, "I'm not a young man, I'm a young girl," and I'd get really upset, and there was this older kid on the playground who would make fun of me. Just this one kid, no one else cared, just this one kid,
Yeah.
and I told my mom about it, and she was like, "You know what? Anytime he comes up to you and he says something like that, just inside your head, you just say, 'Go to hell,' and you walk away." And in some ways, so this memory came up because I think this song, Four Letter Words, it's a version of that. It's just kind of saying, you know what? Like, fuck you, go to hell. Now I'm gonna go just do my shit. I'm gonna like express
Yeah.
that in a safe way, and then I'm gonna move along and live my life. And I think so it's a shout out to my mom. It took like, decades, but she inspired this song in a certain way.
It would be great to find that guy and confront him on the show.
Well, right. And so what's interesting though, I can't remember his name. He was like an older kid. He was
So
like
yeah.
one of those mysterious like 5th graders who I had no idea who he was.
When we have you back on the show, we're going to actually track him down and confront him. But talk to me about your path and your journey. It's such an interesting one. By the way, are you calling me from LA?
Yes, yes, I'm
Awesome. So
calling
this
you
is your
from LA.
studio. It looks great. Looks like you're recording your record there almost. You got a bunch of guitars behind you, which is awesome. How'd you do in the pandemic? Did you obviously you created a lot of music because we're going to talk about your new EP, which drops I think June 11th, I believe, right?
Yes, correct.
And so we'll get into that whole thing. But first, I guess before that whole thing, let's talk about you grew up in the Midwest, right?
Hmm.
And were you
Yeah.
around music a lot as a kid? I think your dad was a guitar player.
Yeah, so I sort of have I don't know if it's unconventional, but trajectory with music. But I grew up around music. I have 2 fathers. I have a biological father and then another father who raised me and adopted me. My biological father loved music, and I think if he had had the opportunity, would have loved to be better at guitar and play it on stage. But he taught me sort of like rudimentary rhythm guitar uh, that I would play while he drunkenly noodled around
Right.
essentially. And I so that kind of gave me this like foundation, but I didn't do anything with it. It
And it
was just
wasn't
some
necessarily a passion of yours either, right?
no, not at all. I was like school, sports. I was very like regimented and kind of high achieving in a sort of typical way, I guess.
Yeah, because
Um,
it's almost like you became a late bloomer later in life with music, right? It wasn't until I think you were actually in college, and then
yep.
it was sort of I believe it was like spoken word rap and almost like rap parody where you started, right? So kind of tell us a story about how that all started for you later in life.
Yeah, I was in college, as you say, and I was, just like real serious about my studies, and I loved being in school. Absolutely loved it. And I got, at the same time, I was being sort of exposed to all this new music. This was at a time when there was lots of file sharing going on. College campuses are such crazy breeding grounds for the sharing of music and the
Yeah.
sharing of taste, and so I'm listening to all this like West Coast rap. I'm hearing UK rap for the first time. I'm hearing like Dizzy Rascal and Wiley for the first time, just feeling like like I'm like the mind blown emoji
Yeah.
person. I'm just like,
Did you hear the Streets?
oh yeah,
Remember? Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Great group
Love the
too.
streets.
Yeah.
And I think it cracked open something inside of me where, I was hearing all this great music. I was hearing different music on the radio, feeling fairly disturbed by the difference.
Yeah.
Uh, and was like, well, like kind of like F this stuff that's on the radio, like I could write that. And a friend of mine was like, okay, yeah, why don't you go and do that? And that essentially began my music career. Um, so I started just writing songs really as jokes. And then,
Just to sort of prove to your friend that you could do this. But
yeah,
you had also been listening to stuff, I believe, like Saul Williams and spoken
hmm
word, right, hip hop, because that had a play in how you started to create music too, I believe, right?
totally. And I
Yeah,
was really, really fascinated by, and continue to be fascinated by wordplay particularly in long form lyrics. And I think, obviously like hip hop spoken word, if you look at the lyrics for those songs, it's there's a
yeah.
lot of content. And so there's all these opportunities to really play with that. And that was my starting point. And yeah, you mentioned this kind of late bloomerness. I've always been a late bloomer, and I developed this hobby in college. And then after college, I was sort of figuring out what I was going to do. I was living in San Francisco, and these opportunities kept coming up, like, hey, you want to open up a show? You want to do this? And I just kept saying yes, and I kept getting better, and I kept getting more invested and sort of emotionally connected to music.
And this was
And
just you and a microphone. Were you like, was it to track? I mean, because when you were opening up these shows, what was it? Because actually later in life, I saw you perform with just a drummer, and I want to talk to you about that because I don't know if you know, but I'm a drummer, and
yes,
I don't think
yes.
I'd seen a lot of like acts, just the singer and the drummer. I'm very friendly with the Kills, so I would always like give them a hard time. I'm like, when are you guys going to get a drummer? And then eventually they broke down, and Jamie was like, all right, no more drum machines. We're gonna have two drummers now. But I want
Yeah.
to talk to you about that. But kind of rewinding a bit. So when you were opening up these shows, Kay, was it you to attract? Because you got into this crew, right, of your friends that were like in the Bay Area, like starting to do all these gigs and whatnot, right?
Yeah, 100%. So my show, we can think of it as sort of an ever expanding operation.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably reached, I don't know how many people I really need on stage at this point, but when I began, yeah, it was me, basically, usually me, a sampler of some type. I used Native Instruments Machine for a long time, where I could loop and I could trigger samples, and I'm running Ableton. So there are some tracks, there's some live sampling. I have an electric guitar, and I am rapping and singing and like lightly humiliating myself, I think, on some level, just like I was so green. I didn't know what
Yeah.
I was doing. Um, but I have to tell you, I did it with incredible passion.
Mm. Yeah, yeah,
and
definitely.
and incredible. This actually came up yesterday at a dinner, like how much delight I took in the creation and performance of music, and how much delight I continue to find in this career and in this exercise, that I find it on some level just truly delightful that any of this can happen.
Well, you must have had encouragement because obviously you kept going. So you probably knew at a certain point you were onto something, I would imagine. And I don't even know who your role
Yeah.
models were back then because obviously we talked about Saul Williams. I know you're a Karen O fan. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And did you have other like female artist role models that you were looking up to? I think you might know I played drums with Courtney Love. So I don't know if people like Courtney and obviously Karen O and I don't the Breeders. I don't know who were some of your inspirations when you were getting into because it was a hybrid type of approach you were taking where it was like hip hop, but also electronica and alternative music too.
Yeah, I think at that time in my development, I sort of had a few big inspirations who were all female, either solo artists or front people. And I think, honestly, one of the biggest ones was Santa Gold,
Great
Santi. And I
artist.
think, because I remember that's one of those records I remember where I was when I heard it for the
Yeah.
first time.
Yeah.
And I felt like, oh, this is the kind of thing that I want to do. It's different because there's these like dub elements and these
Yeah.
other things that aren't what I do, but I see her like just being so her.
Yeah.
And I felt very similarly with the first three MIA records.
Mm-hmm.
I felt really, really inspired by those. I listened to a lot of Missy Elliott as well in that time period. And although, she's a little bit more strictly
Yeah.
in kind of like a hip
Hip hop.
hop,
Yep.
R&B at times genre, her originality, her sheer originality
Yeah.
and creativity and personality was so cool to me. And the other record that was the big, big, big influence on me was Liz Phair's first record,
Mm.
Exile in Guyville,
Yeah.
which sonically very different, but she played a live show at I guess the 15th anniversary of that record that I went to at the Fillmore in San Francisco.
Great
And it
venue.
was one of the most impactful shows of my life. I was just, finishing college, and I saw her up there being both like super vulnerable and super, super competent at the
Yeah.
same
Yeah. Yeah.
time. And I was like, oh, I think that feels like me.
Yeah. Did you go to Lilith Fair? Was that a thing? I don't remember like what age you might have
Yeah,
been when Lilith Fair was happening. So
I think I was too young
okay.
or unaware of it, but I never attended it. No.
Because that was sort of a precursor for all these festivals. It was in one of the early adapters of the festival scene. But interesting enough, you obviously felt some encouragement, as I mentioned to your a lot of your peer group. I would imagine were like, you should do this, and you also felt that it's something you should pursue because you kept going. And even though you started as sort of a parody, but it definitely turned into something. And a lot of the artists that you just mentioned, Sandy Gold, and they were also defying genres, right? Because Sandy Gold
Mhm.
kind of had elements of like alternative music and indie, and definitely I can hear elements of that in your music. And at a certain point, you actually get a deal with RCA, right? And I think you're
Right.
still finding your voice during that point. So walk me up to that point, how that happened from just starting out with your friends, just kind of messing around.
Yeah, so I was at this point, I was living in San Francisco. I was had graduated from college, and I was teaching the GRE. I was teaching GRE classes and SAT classes
Wow.
all around the Bay Area. Um, my roommate was selling hot dogs. Like we were just,
DIY.
you know,
Punk rock, right?
and my parents had moved to Oakland just around then. So I would drive in the daytime, and they had like a basement that I could use. They let me use, and set up like a little mic down there. And I just started, you know, making
Sampling and
stuff.
yeah.
exactly. Sampling, learning how to program, learning how to record myself. Very luckily for me, I began recording my own vocals day one, which has been a really, really powerful asset for me
Mm.
as a solo artist and a musician, because I can record my vocals anywhere, and I can I enjoy comping, and I enjoy vocal production, all that stuff. But um, yeah, I was putting out songs, and a song of mine that actually sampled a Grizzly Bear song kind of got all this attention, and I had just started working with my manager. Like, I'm his first client. Like, whatever. We're just so young, so
Yeah.
green, and yeah, labels start calling, and it's pretty surreal.
This is around the time of Hypebeast too, right?
Yeah, well, this is Hype Machine being the
Hype Machine.
like,
Yeah,
yeah, like if you're number one on Hype Machine,
that's it.
that's it. And
All
so
the
that,
labels start calling, and then before you know it, you get a record deal.
right, which is essentially what happened.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, I was so new. I was so undeveloped, so raw. And that experience at RCA was, I think, and I'm sure you can relate and know many other artists like this, was like so disorienting
Yeah.
and not at the right time for me.
Yeah, they want to put you with producers. They want you to get into writing sessions
Yeah,
to find your voice because you don't have a voice. Find your voice, right?
right. And it's sort of like, no, 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 you do have your voice. You need to just We need to put you somewhere, like, again, by yourself a little bit to develop it. But in doing all those sessions and meeting a lot of producers, I'm very much, I watch people, and I kind of see, oh yeah, right, he's EQing the low end out of this, huh? That's interesting. Okay, I'm gonna try that on my keys next. So I'm just sort of like picking things up as I
Yeah.
go. And that deal ended. I'd been putting out like mixtapes and EPs and stuff, and building a fan base. And I had a couple weeks of like, oh God, my life is my life is over. What have I done? I've made all these terrible mistakes. And but then shortly thereafter, because I also had to give up all the songs I'd been working on.
Right, like
So
60
sort of
songs or something, right? Yeah.
just had to start fresh. And
Yeah.
I think it's actually a really, I'd like to say this to anyone listening who might need this, but like, sometimes when you lose your work, whatever that means for you, it it feels sort of like an insurmountable loss. But I think for me and for a lot of people, what it actually affords you is sort of unprecedented liberation.
Mm.
And that was the greatest gift I actually could have been given, to not be tied to any of this, and to just say, okay,
Start fresh.
start fresh.
Yeah.
What excites me? What's exciting to me?
But I did rewind
And
for 1 second because I do remember, I think I heard your first session with RCA, they put you in the studio with Pharrell, right? So
that's
this must be like, I mean, you haven't really done a lot of studio work. You're doing it on your own. You're at home, imagining your parents' basement, and they're like, all
right.
right, go in the studio with this guy Pharrell. He's got like, 50 million albums sold and 50 million Grammys or whatever, just have some fun. And you must have been intimidated, I would imagine, as a newer artist, right?
Oh my God, I was completely, that whole weekend was just, talk about a fish out of water. I was so overwhelmed. And we it was also the same weekend that they, like, couriered my record deal to the studio, which I think was supposed to make me feel like excited and important, but
Yeah.
actually made me feel like humiliated and nervous. And we went out for like a celebratory dinner that night, like an expensive dinner. I was at that point, it was the most expensive dinner I'd ever had. And we got back to the hotel, it was me and my manager, and I just threw everything up. And that, I think, if I can encapsulate the experience, that sort of, I was way, way kind of out of my comfort zone. And
It was a
you know,
precursor for what's to come, I guess, right?
totally. And it's just like, I think, there are certain artists who right out the gate, they just know, they know, they have their vision, they have this formed. For me, I didn't. And so to go in with a lot, sort of these bigger producers who are used to working, with artists who have that, and that's how they thrive, and that's how they
Yeah.
kind of do their shit. I was just like a little lump of clay. And I was down to experiment, but I didn't have that compass north that I think you really need uh, when you're collaborating with other people in that kind of setting.
Yeah. Have you gone back and listened to the track you did with Pharrell?
No, I lit them on fire and threw them in the trash. I actually don't know where they are, to be
Really?
honest with you.
Was it that bad, or was it just not where you are today musically?
It's not where I'm at. They
Yeah.
weren't
Okay.
bad at all. They're actually, they're I mean, not surprisingly, like Pharrell's
Yeah.
involved. They're cool.
Right.
Um, but me, you can hear, and God, I haven't heard them in years, but from my recollection, you can hear in my voice, um, that I don't have confidence,
Mm.
you know,
Yeah.
on some level.
So you're doing that, and at that point, had you made the transition to start singing, or were you still rapping?
So I was beginning to sing at that point, but really still in the experimental phases of that. I mean, melody was sort of a part of what I was doing, but I didn't know a lot about it, and I hadn't ever really pushed my voice, and I didn't know how people did that, and um I didn't sort of know how to do it myself. And I think, my singing, that's been one of the biggest things to develop, excuse me, again, over time, is understanding how to use my voice
Yeah.
and where I can take it, and where, my sweet spots, and all that stuff. But that definitely took, you, you know, years to
Yeah.
figure that out.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. And at a certain point, did you lose like confidence when you lost the deal with RCA? Because as an artist, you work your whole life. It used to be to get a record deal. You're like, I made it. I got a record deal. So, you write. You have these 60 songs. You lose the songs. You're working with Pharrell. The records, obviously they don't materialize the way they want them. You want them to. So, how do you feel at that point moving forward? Have you lost sort of the confidence in what you were doing, or were you re-inspired?
I think there was a very brief period of confidence loss. But the interesting thing, and I feel like you can probably relate to this experience too, is that I'd spent this time at RCA touring. So I had been writing and performing music. None of it was like an official record on RCA, but I'd been putting out material that they were just like, okay, whatever, put it out. We don't care.
Yeah.
Which I'm grateful for. And just kind of building this like cult following. I didn't realize that's what I was doing, but that's what I was doing. And so the deal ended, and to me that felt like the end of the world. To those people, they don't even really know.
Right. Right. That's
They're just
true.
like, they're stoked. When's the next K-Flay coming out?
Right.
And so I think once I became connected to their experience and their understanding of the situation in a strange way, I was like, oh, yeah, I shouldn't be losing confidence. I should actually feel kind of fortified
Yeah.
and inspired, because like there's people who are waiting on the next thing, and I
Definitely.
need to give it to them. Um so that allowed me to get some perspective and kind of zoom out on my own sense of like pain and failure or whatever, and to say that like, I think this is so true in all aspects of life, but like your own personal failure is not even a blip on anyone else's radar.
That's
So
true.
like focusing on it or giving it like kind of an undue importance in your story doesn't make sense, doesn't serve you well. And yeah, so I think I actually proceeded with um maybe almost like a preternatural sense of confidence
Mm. And had you been
despite
you've
the
been gigging
setback.
this whole time too, right?
Hmm.
And I imagine the shows kept getting bigger and bigger. I know at a certain point you got the Warp Tour, which must have been again overwhelming after going you just playing clubs and stuff, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden you're on these huge stages, right? So what was that like getting the Warp Tour and that all starting for you in that respect?
Well, Warp Tour was a huge, for a variety of reasons, which will derail us. But that
Right.
summer and that tour was if I look back, that was a real shift for me. So a big shift in two ways. First way, I consider that was my basic training for being like a road dog. That was when I learned like, okay, if I'm gonna make it out here in this business, I need to be indestructible,
Yeah,
and I
resilient.
need to be super resilient and super adaptable. And I need I need to really on stage have fun, be passionate, and be vulnerable.
Mm,
And I'm not just I'm not just performing a song. I'm reliving experiences, and I'm helping other people connect to that vulnerability. And
definitely.
and I'm doing it without fog, and it's bright out, and it's fucking 100 degrees,
Right.
and
2
like
p.m.
yeah, it's like
Right.
not a dream
Yeah.
scenario.
Yeah.
So I think it was like basic training on the one hand, and then I think the other thing, which is interesting to note, it introduced me to a world of rock music,
Mm,
because I was still living in like largely like hip hop adjacent worlds.
yeah. So you were not exposed to punk and you weren't exposed to all the alternative rock bands that were happening.
No, I
Yeah.
mean I was, but I wasn't connected to them.
Mm,
And so when I look back, I'm like, oh yeah, that's when I started like really listening to rock music, and specifically heavier music. And that's, I think, there you can see a real shift between my first record and my second record. uh my second record's like a rock record,
yeah.
essentially. And I became, in the same way that I became really excited by and inspired by wordplay, cadence, rhythm, when I first got into this world of hip hop in all of its incarnations. This was when I had that same feeling about rock music. I'm like, oh, you could do this with the guitar, or you could do this with it. That's really interesting. Like, oh
Yeah.
man, this riff, got a riff. What the? This is amazing.
I heard later you got into like Metallica because you discovered riffs, and that's a whole nother rabbit hole we could go down for hours because that heavy music is some of it is beyond me, some of it I really relate to, but I love songs. So I'm sure,
Mm.
like yourself, you relate to the songs, and so yeah, I'm sure the riffing was just it opened your eyes up to whole other directions that you could go musically. But it's funny because I was also watching just the other day this video of you on tour. I don't know if it was like 2014. I think you were in Chicago. You do like a performance, and it's like a day in the life. And it reminded me that like people think that touring is so glamorous, and then you go on tour, you're sleeping in that coffin, you're bumping your head. I could never sleep on those things, and I'm like, man, I always wanted to go on tour. I'm not sure this is what I thought it was going to be. It's funny because just to go back to what you were saying with the Warp Tour, you did that, and you're like, was it everything you thought it was going to be? Was touring when you finally toured in that capacity something like the Warp Tour that every artist sort of ascertains to do that one day? Did you think it was everything you thought it would be?
I think nothing is ever what I thought it would be.
Right. Especially now, right?
um when it comes to music in particular,
Yeah.
I think, and I hope that, I try to approach this career and this world with a lot of openness, because I think what's
Mm,
so beautiful about music is that you get to be who you are.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, people accept you, and it's crazy that there's people talk about like it's a lot of outcasts and a lot of misfits, and like, yeah, there's a reason for that, because it's like it's safe to be yourself. And I I, I feel like, all of the new experiences and new kinds of tours and whatever, I'm approaching with almost no expectations, because I know that undoubtedly they will not be met. They may be exceeded. They may, I don't know, I may be very underwhelmed, but it's, I think the most surprising thing to me about touring, and you're mentioning this, is, how kind of, physically and emotionally taxing just the schlepping and the getting places and the groundhog dayness of it all
That is a
can
great
be.
word to describe it, the schlepping, because
Yeah.
I definitely did some schlepping. I thought if I have
Yes.
to set up my own drums on this is really going
I
to
was gonna
suck.
say drummers have to schlep the most.
Yeah.
Drummers, I like, I much respect.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. So you're touring constantly, right? And when you're a newer artist and you're out there, you're hitting the pavement, you're on the road 24/7, and then essentially, a couple of years ago, the world comes to a halt with this pandemic. Like, what goes through your mind in terms of survival?
Oh, well, I mean, I think my mind first goes to, how do I take this period of time and be as prolific as possible
Mm.
while still giving myself a second to, like, start like constructing my own crossword puzzles and like pursuing my weird hobbies. Uh,
Coffee and birds, right?
so, what? So the simple things in life.
Yeah,
So it's like, how can I be super prolific? How can I also like reconnect to some of the basic stuff? And, prior to the pandemic, I was in the last, like, I guess the year and a half before that, I had been getting involved with other projects on the writing side, in a more concerted fashion. And so just continuing to build that out as a songwriter for others. And, you know, I actually strangely don't hate Zoom sessions, particularly if I already know one or two of the people
sure.
involved. And
You don't have to drive anywhere. It's
yeah, it's kind
it's
of
very
sick.
convenient. I mean, you don't actually get to see anybody in person, but some people like that. I don't know. It just depends who you
Yeah,
are.
totally.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think I took it as a period, like, how can I make this next project for me, like, how can I make the next K-Floyd project great, and how can I create like a visual world around it, because often there's not time for that. So I took the pandemic to really do that, and that's like what I'm excited about the music, of course, that's coming out, but I'm really excited about all the visual companion pieces. So that's really exciting. Um, and yeah, I just kind of, I think in some ways continued what I was doing, and had a chance to, I don't know, really really think about and value what live performance means to me as part of, I'm not in the audience at my own shows, but I'm in the experience,
of
you
course.
know,
Yeah.
and really like stepping back and taking a moment to consider, my role in it and what I derive from it and what I put into it, and how can I do that better? How can I keep
And
doing that better?
yeah, and let's talk about it for a moment because now you're on Interscope or an offshoot of Interscope, and you've done this for a while. And obviously, kind of going back to what you were saying, Kay, it's not easy financially for newer artists to survive now, right? So everything stops, the pandemic hits. Do you worry about financially when that started a year and a half ago? How am I going to survive? Because most artists make money touring, really. And so, I mean, I know that you pivoted, so I want to talk about things like Twitch. Definitely want to get into new record. I love the cover you did of Self-Esteem by the Offspring. So I actually want you to perform that. They were on the show last week. They were on the show. So it's actually a great
Oh,
tie-in because they were my last guest before you.
oh, amazing.
So yeah, but just going back, did you worry about that financially? As a newer artist, it's hard enough to make it. Now the pandemic hits, nobody can tour. and really touring is really the way that most new artists make money, and merch and things like that. So what goes through your head in terms of survival?
Well, okay, so to backtrack for one sec, I was on Interscope for my last 2 records and actually parted ways with them super amicably. I had a great experience and I love everybody over there. In fact, I was just with my old head of sync last night having
Oh,
dinner.
cool. Nice.
And so now I'm on BMG, and it's a
Okay.
little bit of a different style of a deal
Sure.
where again I, I have that autonomy,
Yeah.
and I think my first record I put out independently, and there were a lot of elements of that experience that I loved. And then I got to have like 4 years at Interscope. I learned all this stuff. And now I was
Yeah.
like, okay, set me free again. Let the bird out of its cage. So this has been, I think for me, a really cool time because I have been able to be a little bit nimble
Mm.
because I'm not in this bigger
Right. You're not part of the
infrastructure.
machine. Yeah.
So I feel honestly extremely lucky to be flexible in that way. So, you know, I was concerned about the lack of touring and how that was going to impact my career. But, you know, I knew that I needed to make new music to do any of this, to ever tour again.
Yeah.
Um, so that really became the focus. And I tried not to go too far down the rabbit hole of what ifs and how am I gonna, what's gonna happen and
Yeah.
any of that stuff. And
You just wanted to create.
I just want to create, and I've been lucky enough too that, a lot of I have a really good relationship, in the sync and licensing world, and a lot of
Mm.
my music had success in that world. So that's like a really great way, and a lucky way for me to be able to earn a living when I don't have to tour because,
Yeah.
like, my song's in a TV show. Um, so that's
So that helps you get through it. Definitely
big
makes it a
time.
little bit easier with everything going on in life. And so now actually, so you dropped this. Let's talk a little bit about the Offspring cover, Self Esteem, because I actually didn't know you did it. I went back and I was stalking your Instagram for a moment, and it's great. What a great version of the song, and I love
Thank
what you
you.
wrote about kind of revisiting some of these artists. Right? I don't know if Limp Bizkit was my favorite band from that genre, but either way, Green Day, great bunch of guys, friends of mine. They're all great. So how did you come to pick those songs to reimagine and really approach them in your own way?
Well, the genesis of the project came because of Self-Esteem by the Offspring. So this was a totally not planned organic thing. I was driving in Los Angeles and I heard that song, and for whatever reason I like actually listened to the lyrics. I've been hearing that song in the ether for
Yeah,
years and years,
40 million records.
and but I hadn't really listened to the verse lyrics, and I did, and I was like, God, what a sad song.
Yeah,
And it got me thinking about, so here I am. I'm a woman, and I'm existing in this world of alternative rock, and specifically alternative rock radio, which largely plays like oldies,
yeah,
essentially. And so I'm hearing 90s music all the time. And it got me thinking about, you know, male expressions of vulnerability or emotionality
mm,
in the context of the sonic world of like mid to late 90s rock.
yeah,
And, I think there's perhaps even a bigger conversation to have about, how young boys and girls are socialized to express themselves and their
yeah,
emotions. But I thought it would be I just thought it would be so cool to do that song as a piano ballad so that people could really hear what Dexter was saying.
yeah.
Um, because those, I felt like, well, man, if these lyrics are hitting me like this, surely they're going to hit someone else like this. And
Definitely.
if I'm able to frame it like that, I wonder what I could do. And then COVID hit, and one of my long-term collaborators, JT Daly, and I sort of sat down. We're like, let's do an EP. Let's pick a couple songs where, you know, I can take a song that felt aggressive, but belied an underlying vulnerability. And so with Brain Stew by Green Day, which was the second song I did for that, you know, that song's about, you know, being high on speed and can't sleep and
Yeah.
what that feels like,
Yeah.
which is terrifying.
Yeah.
You know, anytime the world's closing in on you and you feel like you're losing your mind, sucks. And never fun. Don't do it, kids.
Never fun. Yeah.
But yeah, for that song, you know, that was reframing it. Well, hey, for me, when I've been at my very lowest, that actually happens to be when my world opens up,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
Paradoxically.
Yeah.
So how can I represent that sonically? How can I make this song feel like an opening instead of a closing? And then, you know, the real challenge, as you mentioned, was Limp Bizkit, because that song Break Stuff that I covered was, you know, lightly my early COVID anthem.
Yeah, I read that it sort of helped you get through COVID. I mean, which who would have thought, Limp Bizkit would have been your anthem during this pandemic.
And, you know, to backtrack for a sec, I'm a late bloomer, so I didn't listen to Break Stuff until like 5 years ago.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't even have that baggage of what Limp Bizkit like kind of represented in the zeitgeist.
Yeah, because it comes with a whole another, again, a deeper dive discussion, but it does come
Yes,
along with something for sure.
100%. And
Yeah.
that's what, you know, of course, that then felt to me like, oh, this is a real challenge.
Yeah.
Like if I can really, again, reframe this song instead of it being like, you know, just like
Right.
fuck everything, I'm
Yeah.
gonna rip your ass with a chainsaw, like um how can I maybe think about this as like, okay, these feelings of wanting to be destructive, right? They usually come because you're unhappy with yourself. You don't feel good about you, and that's why you want to lash out. And maybe why you don't feel good about yourself is that you're depressed, you're hopeless. Doesn't feel like the world is open to you. And that kind of wistfulness I thought would be really cool to try to do. And you know, I had to that cover was not a straight cover. I rewrote the second verse. I excluded many things. I changed the chord progression. I added a lot of stuff, but in the end, I felt really proud of that one because it sparked a lot of really great conversation.
Definitely.
And um yeah, again, if you ever want to do a side chat about like new metal and
And K Flay.
and K Flay, I'm up for it because I think there are so many like gender and power
Yeah.
dynamic, and so
The truth
it's
is, Limp Bizkit it's not that they were that bad. It's just that Fred Durst, the singer, shot his mouth off, pissed off the entire rock and roll community. And then, like, no one wanted anything to do with the group. But
right.
on that, it would be actually great to hear you perform Self Esteem. So it'd be great to like jump to that because your interpretation song is incredible. By the way, we can insert this. So this is like me. Is that a song that we can do here? Because we can.
100%.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So I'd love to hear you. I'd love to jump to your version of Self Esteem. And then I want to come back and talk about Four Letter Word, the new record, the EP, and that whole story. But let's jump now to Self Esteem, the K Flay version.
I wrote her off for the 10th on today and practiced all the things I would say. She came over, I lost my nerve. I took her back and made her dessert. Now I know that's okay, 'cause I got no self-esteem. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. When she's saying, oh, that she wants only me, then I wonder why she sleeps with my friends. When she's saying, oh, that I'm like a disease, then I wonder how much more I can spend. The more you suffer, the more it shows you really care. Right, yeah. Yeah. We make plans to go out at night. I wait till 2, then I turn out the light. This rejection's got me so low. She keeps it up, I just might tell her so. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. When she's saying, oh, that she wants only me, then I wonder why she sleeps with my friends. When she's saying, oh, that I'm like a disease, then I wonder how much more I can bend. Well, I guess I should stick up for myself, but I really think it's better this way. The more you suffer, the more it shows you really care. Right, yeah.
All right, well, we're back. That was an incredible version. So thank you for that. And
Of course.
let's talk about four-letter word. Okay, so it actually just came out this past Friday, the 23rd, which is exciting. And by the way, which four-letter words are we talking about? Could be love. It could be anything. I don't know.
Well, I love that you say that. I think, explicitly we're talking about the F bomb
Right.
in this song, but that title to me was sort of interesting because of course, like, there's always that like tongue-in-cheek play on like love being a four-letter word. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Did you happen to watch this Netflix show with Nicolas Cage, The History of Curse Words?
no.
It's incredible. You should watch it because they go deep into the history of like, I mean, I can curse. It's my own shit, whatever, fuck shit,
Yeah.
whatever. And every hour is devoted to a different curse word. And by the way, I had no idea there was someone named like Mr. and Mrs. Fuck back then. Like, I don't know how the word, but it's like fascinating stories about words that we use every day that we just have. They've taken on these meanings, and you have no idea the backstory. I didn't have any idea. I mean, I definitely did not know that there was a person named that years ago and where it came from. But pretty interesting show if you have like a couple of hours to kill. But
Wow.
so I
Yeah.
definitely recommend watching it. But it's sort of a vengeful love song. Would I dare say? And it's like a heavier song for you. Wouldn't you agree? It's sort of in that vein. It's moving towards a heavier sound for you.
100%. And I think to me fundamentally the song is about catharsis. And I've been thinking about this notion of catharsis throughout quarantine because I think none of us have had it,
Yeah.
right? Like there are many ways to achieve it, but they often involve getting outside the house, shouting at a live show, like these things that just haven't been accessible to us. And really this whole EP that's coming out, and every song in it is me screaming.
Which is
It's
great.
me screaming something. And I feel so strongly right now that music that gives people a vehicle for their own catharsis is like so dope. The music I was gravitating to during quarantine was, and break stuff being one of the songs, was that for me. It was
Right,
like,
right.
I can sing this, I can play it loud, like it's hurting my ears. And you know what? Now I can just be like a kind citizen. I don't have to feel all that. And
How heavy
while,
did you go, by the way? I mean, was it like Slayer heavy, or would you
oh
just
my
stop
God.
in Metallica? Because
When-
I tend to stop at Metallica. Like, you could go really dark and deep and really heavy, and then it loses a sense of melody. I
right.
know you were talking at some other podcasts about this band Cradle of Filth. I mean, even the names are just like, just stop. It's like, I'm fine with I like heavy, but it's always been about a sense of melody for me. So
Totally. And are you familiar with a UK band called Slaves?
I am actually, yeah.
Okay. So
I know
I'm
that
like,
my buddy sings for the Cult, Ian Astbury, and he loves them. So he's always
okay.
talking about them.
So I'm like, the president of their fan club essentially. And I, for me, they are so much of what I love about like heavy music, because it's also fun.
Yeah.
And I think, that's where a band like Metallica, no offense, I don't find Metallica that fun.
It's not party rock.
No. And I think for me the sweet spot, and what I love to do, and what I really hope like Four Letter Words feels like for people, is that it's heavy, but it's also fun, and it also has a sense of humor. And those are like the crucial ingredients for me, for deep catharsis, is like,
Yeah.
because I even, I was going through like a really hard time when I wrote that song. And for the record, some people because the first line of the song is, I drank a liter of tequila in my bedroom. I didn't drink a whole liter. I'd be dead.
Was this about your current relationship, or was this about some fictitious,
Yeah,
relationship in your mind?
this is based in kind of the ups and downs of a relationship, and it's I think for me, a lot of songs they combine different you combine different experiences into one thing. But at this very moment, I was feeling like angry.
Hmm.
And I am usually very nice, and I don't like to be mean. But I was like, I'm ready to blow. I'm a kettle and I'm ready to blow. I'm screaming.
So would
And
it be safe to say the EP is full of angst, or is it more optimistic? I mean, what would you, because it's not out yet. It's coming out June 11th. So
I think it's pretty angsty.
it is. Okay.
But
So it was the pent up frustration during the pandemic that led to the angst of this new EP.
yeah, and I think the pent up frustration of living in this modern world.
Yeah.
I think it sort of transcends like a few of these songs, or a bunch of them, I started at least the demos before the quarantine. So these were they were developing and beginning, but I think, they're, whatever. When you're making music over a long period of time, you always wanted to challenge yourself. And one of the things that is uncomfortable for me is expressing anger and frustration, and doing it in a sort of in your face way. And
Hmm.
so, knowing that about myself, it seemed like that might be fruitful territory to explore, and it might yield something really interesting and different. And that was my mindset going into this. So I think all the songs have a heaviness to them, but I really do think it's a fun record. Like, I think you can put it on and like go running, and you'll probably beat your running time. Like,
Yeah.
I hope it has that energy.
It definitely does. Well, I want to jump to Four Letter Word. It's going to be great. We're going to have you perform the song. So we're excited for that too. And then we'll come back in just a moment.
I drank a liter of tequila in my bedroom. It's taking every ounce of power not to text you. Your body frozen in my mind like a statue. Wish I could scratch you for the letters of our tattoo. I'm a believer, but I'm killing in the hallway. That your love's only gonna make my heart break. While I was crying, you were flying at a party. Baby, you played me like Atari at an arcade. I'm usually nice, but just for the night, I wanna be mean, I wanna fight. I wanna say things I've been keeping inside. 4-letter words, I'm cursing. Fuck you, you didn't deserve me. You lying with the Bible in your right hand. Thought you could woo me like I wasn't gonna bite back. I'm sick of manipulative venomous, spending all of my time second guessing my mind. Keep on taking the high road, but I'm ready to go low. So I'm usually nice, but just for the night, I wanna be mean, I wanna fight. I wanna say things I've been keeping inside. 4-letter words, I'm cursing. Fuck you, you didn't deserve me. Buried alive, but I learned to hold my breath. No, you won't fool me twice. You can't have this back. I'm cursing. Fuck you, you didn't deserve me.
And we're back. Amazing. So thank you for that too. It's so great when artists perform on the show. I love it. And I want to announce, actually, I think you had actually announced a bunch of shows coming up, right? 2022, Kay?
Yes, 100%.
So talk to me about like what's on tap for 2022. I noticed that there were shows, that you announced out there. So how do you feel about getting out there, performing now? Or actually, well, it won't be for a while, but I feel like at that point, you're going to probably feel comfortable about it, right?
Yeah, and I've got, we'll see. I've got some shows on the book, some festivals this fall, and some other things this year. No headline stuff. So we'll see how, hopefully, if those can happen and how it feels. But yeah, I'm out of my mind excited. I'm not sure I understand.
Oh,
Whoa.
Well, I guess she doesn't understand either.
That was crazy. That was my Apple Watch. Wow.
She said, I don't think I'm that excited or something. And she said, I'm not sure I understand.
She came on. Okay. Well, apologies for my watch talking. No, I'm like, yeah, I am just kind of out of my mind with it. Like, again, hearkening back, like really just examining, okay, well, yeah, what is the point of a live show? Yeah, I kind of took it for granted because I'm in it. I'm show after show, tour after tour. But like, what is the point? And like, the point, I think, in many ways, is to create community, of course, and to create memories, because a lot of memories center on live shows. Not really for me. It's for everyone else out there. Like, they go on their first date. They meet at the show. In fact, my brother met his wife at a concert.
Amazing.
So these are gathering.
I need to go to more of your shows then, I guess.
I mean, I've had a few. Sorry, my brother met his wife at a Chromeo concert.
Oh, well,
not a K Flay concert.
I'll just say it's a K Flay concert.
But that being said, many people have met at a K Flay concert and gotten married. And who come back and they're like, look at the ring, we did it.
Amazing. Well, that's got to feel good, right?
It feels really good. And it feels like, I'm lucky. I have a great fan base, and it's fun. The show is it's like wild, but it's not scary, you know? And I think that for me is a great place to be in. But I've just been thinking about, how do I make this experience of community? How do I help people make memories, especially when people really need to make some memories, like some
Yeah,
good ass memories. And how do I take the musical performance to the next level? So I'm kind of that I'm engaged in that right now, which is exciting because we've had this period of time when it felt like that was almost a pipe dream. So don't even start thinking about it.
definitely.
So I'm just really hopeful that, the health technology brings us to a place where we can do it safely, we can have fun, and
Well, it's starting. I mean, in LA, they are starting to allow concerts inside, and I'm in New York now, and hence the elaborate background. And things are starting. You know, it's starting to feel alive. I mean, I think we're a little bit of ways away, but I feel like I think Bonnaroo was announced not long ago, right? So,
right.
you know, time will tell. I know that they announced some festivals in London. Those got probably rescheduled, to my knowledge. I think maybe Reading got Leeds, whichever one got rescheduled. But yeah, I mean, we're almost there. And I think people need it. And they say after every great, after every depression or pandemic, there's like a renaissance and people, an artistic renaissance. So it'll be interesting to see how much art is created. And I think people are dying to have the live experience again, especially when it comes time to music, even though music is almost the last thing to come back with all this, right? But
Yeah.
I feel like you'll probably do some shows this year with the way things are going. Don't you feel fairly optimistic about it?
I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah,
Um and I really hope so, because I think, yeah, I've just realized what a big part of so many people's lives they are, and again, just how important as memory making experiences they are. And
definitely.
that's like, I don't know, to me that's really beautiful.
Yeah, so June 11th, the album comes out, which is great, the EP. And you've been doing Twitch, right? Let's talk about the Twitch thing for a moment.
Yeah.
So live on Twitch, what, 3 times a week?
Yeah, I'm live on Twitch Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, noon Pacific. And I'm a month in, and it's been a new frontier for me. And I think, we've been talking a lot on the stream about beginner's mind and the power of it. And,
Mm,
sort of talking about the beginning of my career, it's like, yeah, when you're starting out, you don't know what you're doing. Which can make you feel like an idiot on the one hand, or it can make you feel like, you are the best possible scientist. Like you're
right.
coming onto a new planet, so you've got great questions. And I think for me, I'm feeling that beginner's mind, both, the side of like, because there's a lot of technological aspects
Yeah.
to being able to stream, and I'm recording music live and tracking vocals live, and so there's a lot that's going into it. But it's exciting to be live on the internet. It's different from not being live. It's different from being able to curate it.
Yeah. Do you have people sending you music, which you then will turn into music? Is that like the songs? Is that happening yet? Or is that something you thought about doing?
Yeah, so right now what I'm doing is, it's kind of a mix. I'm having guests on, and we're talking, just friends chatting.
You had
I
Group Love on the show, right?
Yeah, I had Hannah from Group
Anna?
Love
Yeah.
on last
Yeah.
week. And yeah, I had Bishop Briggs on, I guess, the day after that.
Right.
So I've been having some of my music friends on to talk. And I'm also doing crossword puzzles, which I'm obsessed with.
That's great.
And but I've been having people sort of have been working it, which is pretty interesting. Is I'm having people like send little voice notes, and then I'm sampling it and making like beats and tracks out of that,
Awesome.
which is pretty cool. And again, kind of like what I did when I started. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, here's a sample. Okay, well, make a song out of it.
Taking it all back to where it started.
Yep.
Well, this episode is one of the first ones we've done with Spin Magazine. So hopefully we'll go live with Spin Magazine when we release this. And maybe we could give like a little snippet of what we've done here, some of the live songs, but about a week or so away from that. So I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing you again when we
Yeah.
launch this with Spin Magazine. And this is great. Such a fascinating conversation. You're great. I can't wait to see you play in person.
Yes.
And that'll happen for sure. And it'd be great to have you here in person one of these days. When I'm not in New York, I'm in LA, and we can do this again in person. So
I would absolutely love that. And yeah, thank you, Scott, so much for having me. This was a great chat, and I just really appreciate it.
definitely. So June 11th, pick up the record, and I might be seeing you in a week when we launch this with Spin Magazine.
Hell yeah, I love it.
Okay. Thanks, Kay. See
Okay,
you soon.
later.
Bye.